Welcome back, guys. So today we are going to look at a different problem. In the last few days, we have been looking at pods, and today we will move to deployments and a service. Let me create the problem first. So I have a deployment and I have a service. They are tied to each other. I will apply the problem, and it created a deployment and it is creating the container. So let's wait for a while. We get pods. Okay, so we have two pods running. If I do a kget svc, which stands for service, Kubernetes is going to be our default service, and we created a backend service for our web backend pod. So this service has a cluster IP, which means that anything in the cluster can talk to this service without requiring any additional configuration. It can use the full name of the pod. But we have the cluster IP over here. And if I do a kget endpoints, you will see our backend service has no endpoints. And when a service has no endpoint, that means that you cannot connect to the pod. A service is like an intermediate thing that helps the user talk to the pod. The user sends a request to the service will send it to the pod, and the pod responds with whatever the response is. In this case, we don't have an endpoint, so the user is unable to talk to the service. If the user cannot talk to the service, the user cannot talk to the pod because the service is in between the pod and the user. Now, what is wrong with this service? So if I clear the screen and I do a kdescribe svc, how does a service know which pod it needs to go to? So when I call the service, how will the backend service know that it has to go to the backend pod? Well, that is configured in the selector. We tell the service what pods it should select. And in this case, we have a tier equal to backend API. So if I do a kget pods, we have the web backend, but we don't see any labels. And when we solved the node selector problem, we saw this command where we have minus minus show labels, and it will show us the labels for the pod. And we have the pod template hash. We can ignore this, but the label to the pod is app equal to backend API. And if I do a kget service, actually kdescribe service with backend service, you will see that the selector, the pods it is trying to select is tier equal to backend API. But in our labels, we have app equal to backend API. So there are two ways to solve this. One, I will edit the service, backend service, and in this edit, in the selector, I am going to go into the insert mode and type app. So app equal to backend API, get endpoints. You will see that it has the endpoint of the pods. So if I do, let me clear the screen, kget endpoints, and if I do a kget -o wide, you will see the IP addresses of the pod over here. So the service basically knows that it can connect to these two pods. The other way we could have solved this is I will go back and apply my problem. And here, now if I do a kget endpoints, it's going to break because what was it, backend? The selector it is looking for is actually tier equal to backend API. So it is looking for both of them. Actually, I should have. So I will get rid of the old one, only keep the new one, clear the screen. We have the describe, and our endpoints are broken because there's no tier equal to backend API. And if I do a minus minus show labels, you will see it has an app equal to backend API. The other way we can solve this problem is change the labels at the pod. This is not recommended because a service should be configured to talk to the pod. The pods of a deployment should not be changed to make the service available. So it's like a one-way street. To change this, you can do a KEdit deploy, and this is our backend API. And over here, match labels for the app. Here we'll change it to tier, and here we'll change it to tier. And it's saying that it is not valid. So we cannot change the labels when the deployment is running. So I will do a k delete minus f problem.yaml. This will delete both the deployment and the web service. Let's go to problem, and over here, let's change this to tier problem, and this will deploy the pods. If I do a show labels, it is going to show tier equal to backend API. If I do a kget service, we have the backend service. And if I do a kget backend service in YAML format, we have actually kget endpoints. We will have the endpoints of the pods. And the way you can check this is show labels and -o wide. So you can see this IP in here, 1.5 and 0.5 for this one. But that is it for this video, guys. Always look at the selector when you're trying to troubleshoot any service. That is the most common problem that you will see working with Kubernetes, because the only way a service can talk to a pod or a deployment is through the selector. So make sure your selectors are right. And that is it for this video, guys. I will see you guys in the next one.